Hey everyone, welcome back to the fourth installment of our Halloween anthology series, What If the Pokemon World Had a Zombie Apocalypse? If you haven't seen the last part, it is on my channel, and covers the story of how an evil man uses bad times to his advantage. Link in the iCard.
Once again, thank you to Plus for designing and creating the art of the zombies, and don't forget to subscribe, drop a like, and check out Pickle Channel while you're there, and share the video with your friends.
But enough of us boring you to death, let's get on with scaring you to death.
So, sit back, relax if you can, and enjoy Chapter 4. Truth.
It all ends today. These are the words Silver tells himself as he enters the burned-out husk of Mahogany Town. After 9 hellish months, Silver has become desensitized to the sight of decimation that stands before him, the after effect of that awful virus, and so simply gets to work clearing away the small group of shambling sick that stand between him and his objective. Bringing out Feraligatr and Sneasel, he tells the former to use Iron Tail, with the spikes on its tail suddenly taking on the appearance of an axe blade, while the latter uses Metal Claw, with the pair promptly dispatching all around them. It is an ugly business, as through much trial and error, Silver has come to the conclusion that in order to kill these abominations, one must destroy both the brainstem and the pituitary gland, which means often attacking twice, once to decapitate, and a second time to pulverize the brain. Mere decapitation alone is not enough, as these monsters can live on even as a head, something he discovered a few months back, when one had bitten his Houndoom on the leg after seemingly being killed. While crushing the head is another possibility, and a quicker one, only requiring a single attack, it is much riskier, as with viscera and bone flying everywhere, it is far too easy to receive an infected cut, or else get a drop of its bodily fluids in an orifice, or mucosal area, without even noticing until it is too late. As for immolation, Silver would not recommend it, as while it can get the job done, the smell of their burning flesh tends to attract a dozen more, making the situation even worse. No, his way is best. 2 quick slashes and the deed is done. In the time it has taken Silver to have this reflection, his pair of Pokemon have done their job, and so giving them a stoic nod, he heads for the souvenir shop. Like everywhere else, it is in disarray, though truthfully, he couldn't care less about some tacky overpriced junk store. All he cares about is the Team Rocket base situated beneath this place. Making use of Feraligatr's tail axe once again to cleave through the hidden door, Silver steps inside and begins heading down the ramp, with it leading him deep underground. Though the hideout still has some power, which is a novelty in and of itself these days, the batteries are clearly running low, as the lights keep flickering on and off, something Silver does not like, as with them being underground there is no natural light, meaning occasionally he is left in pitch darkness, making him vulnerable to any infected who might be lurking around down here.
Once, he had been the sort to lurk in darkness, having even snuck into Elm's Pokemon lab and stolen his Feraligatr back when it was a Totodile. Of course, back in those days, stealth had not been a requisite survival skill like it is now, instead simply being a way to avoid getting into trouble with the professor. Briefly, Silver wonders if the man is even still alive. Doubtful honestly, since with the way his head was so buried in work that he didn't even notice a kid to break in and steal one of his Pokemon, he probably never even looked up to see the apocalypse was going on around him. Instead, keeping on working until some infected busted in and bit him on the... well, not that it matters. Nothing from the old world matters anymore, since nothing can bring it back. All that matters now is to make sure that those who turned the world into a living nightmare pay the price for their sins. A moment later, the lights flick back on, with Silver going on the move once again while Feraligatr and Sneasel flank him on either side. While the initial corridor is not so bad, as there are only 2 ways from which an enemy can approach, things start getting hairy when it expands out into a vast tunnel network, with each housing many doors from which a monster could burst from at any moment. Being a prudent young man, Silver and his team make sure to check each room before advancing down any corridor, as the last thing they want is to be ambushed from behind. For the most part, the trio finds the rooms to be deserted and derelict, having likely not seen use for months. However, this all changes when Silver enters what appears to be a break room, as sitting on the table is what appears to be a half-eaten rations pack. While this alone does not entirely rule out the notion of this base being abandoned, the condition of it does. It is neither moldy nor dusty, suggesting that it was eaten at most a few hours ago. Someone is here. This thought fills Silver with morbid elation, as despite all of his best efforts, this is the first rocket hideout he's found that still has people living in it, meaning that perhaps if luck is is really on his side, he could be here. Reinvigorated by this, Silver presses deeper in, exhibiting more haste as he checks each room so that when he finally finds a room with people, his mind almost doesn't register, having gone into autopilot. Thankfully, Sneasel and Alligator's snarls snap him back to reality, with Silver being shocked to see the face of that mad old quack, Dr. Namba, along with several other Team Rocket scientists, all whom appear to be in the middle of some gruesome experiment with several afflicted strapped to tables, though some might call Silver a hypocrite for his disgust considering his own tests around how best to kill them. Those had been entirely organic, gained as means to survive, while in contrast, this shows all the hallmarks of forethought and planning, a fact that makes the young redhead's stomach turn as he surveys the scene of butchery. From the looks of things, Namba and his team have been hard at work, grafting parts and organs of the infected onto healthy and presumably unwilling test subjects, while also replacing the afflicted's lost body parts with those they took from healthy donors, creating a series of disgusting amalgams, sometimes of multiple human and sometimes of humans and Pokemon, held together by flimsy stitches. It's so revolting, and more than that, it is unnecessary, as despite not knowing why Namba did this, Silver could have guessed the outcome from the start. The necrosis overwhelms everything else, no matter how small the part of them carrying the plague is, resulting in every subject winding up as a screaming, drooling monster.
However, none of them are half the monster their creator is, and as Silver glares at Namba, he demands to know what the hell he thinks he's doing here. Self-important as ever, Namba blusters that he's employing the scientific method to create a cure, something a short-sighted brat like Silver could never understand. Though with a scowl, the boy replies that he's putting a stop to it right now. He then orders his pair of Pokemon to end these pieces of Team Rocket filth. They're refusing to go down like this. Namba grumbles that while he hates to lose his specimens, it is better than losing his life, as he presses a button on the wall, causing each of the table straps to come undone. At once, pandemonium breaks out, with the rocket scientists as the ones closest to the table being attacked first, while Namba himself uses this as cover to flee. This quickly doubles the number of infected for Silver to deal with, and in such a confined space, the odds are not in his favor, with him and his Pokemon falling back into the corridor in the hopes of splitting up this new horde. However, this doesn't make things much easier due to the narrowness of the passage forcing them to run until they find a doorway they can dive into, and wait for the plague-addled monstrosities to pass. Knowing that leaving them unchecked is a recipe for disaster, Silver then makes the difficult call to have his team leap back out into the tunnel and strike from behind, with his Pokemon doing the decapitation while he deals with the brains. This just leaves Namba, and thanks to the echoey nature of the metal floors, it does not take Silver long to track him, with the athletic youth quickly gaining on the out-of-shape academic and tackling him to the ground. Furiously, Namba orders Silver to get off him, while thrashing wildly, though when Feraligatr plants its heavy foot on the doctor's head, he relents, instead demanding to know what the boy wants. Coldly, Silver informs Namba that he's going to take him to his father, since if Team Rocket's top scientist is here, then it stands to reason the head honcho is as well. Then, as if Namba needed further inducement, Sneasel lays its visceral-laden claw against the doctor's cheek, with the peach-haired man knowing full well that even a small scratch from that will turn him into one of the infected. Sweating profusely, Namba gasps that alright, he'll do it, but the Rocketeer should know he won't enjoy the experience. Though as Silver pulls him roughly to his feet and shoves him to start walking, he replies that he never does when it comes to his father. The whole reason Silver had come to Johto in the first place was because of Giovanni, to track him down. Back then though, Silver had thought his father's only crime of note was leaving him behind when he fled Kanto, though as he would soon learn, this was only a consequence of Giovanni's true sin. In a blind attempt to augment the Pokerus virus so that his Pokemon would grow beyond their physical limits, he had assembled three of the greatest minds in the region, Dr. Namba, Dr. Fuji, and Professor Sebastian, with the men using their vast experience and considerable resources of Team Rocket to make Giovanni's dream come true.
Naturally, with so much on their side, they succeeded, and what a success it was, with Patient Zero having the strength to go toe-to-toe with the ace Pokemon of the current World Coordination Series Monarch. It truly seemed as if nothing would be able to stand in the way of Team Rocket's ambitions. That is, except for the monster they created. From the beginning, it had been volatile, mauling Professor Sebastian as its first act, and biting Leon's Charizard more than once during their exhibition match. Even the agents who had been dispatched to contain it could do little against its fury, with many receiving bites of their own, though little did they realize the significance of this at the time. Had this melody of madness stayed confined to Patient Zero, there would have been no issue, as the trio of scientists were already working on ways to improve their initial design, though, as they soon learned, any bitten by the beast would take on its traits, becoming ravenous, rabid, and most terrifying of all, gaining the very strength the augmented virus was supposed to impart. This had made containing the infected impossible, not that that it mattered, as by that point, agents who had been previously bitten were out on assignments in every region of the world. The end had come. The average person just didn't know it yet. Of course, they learned soon enough, with Kanto being the first to fall due to having a head start on infections, though by that point, Giovanni had long since fled to avoid the blame, and Silver had followed after him, stealing his Totodile and beginning his gym challenge as a mean to get strong enough to face his father. As one would expect, the value of a badge rapidly decreased when flesh-eating abominations began roaming the streets of every major city in Johto, though this is not to say they became entirely worthless, as the skills Silver had learned during the early legs of his journey allowed him to survive and stay one step ahead of the hordes. For a time, he had even become something of a hero, though he still finds the notion laughable, having been one of the trainers to answer the Elite Four's call to escort civilians to the Indigo Plateau safe zone, it being the last bastion of the joint Kanto-Johto region that was entirely protected from the infected thanks to the strength of Lance and his elites. For his efforts, he had been offered a place inside the commune, a chance to live a safe life, waiting out the storm, but he couldn't accept it, not until he faced his father and found out why he abandoned him. As an alternate form of payment, Lance had told him about this place, with that being what led Silver to Mahogany Town, and as he and Namba now walk down the long hallway to Giovanni's personal sanctum, the young redhead feels ready to at last put this matter to bed. As the most important person in the base, it stands to reason that Giovanni has the best security, with Namba leading Silver to a thick metal door, stating that the boss is inside, before keying in the access code and testily asking if he can go now. Figuring he has no further need for the scientist, Silver dismisses him with a wave, and as Namba scurries away, no doubt to conduct some new foul experiment, Silver pulls open the door.
Once, this room would have been a lush apartment decorated to Giovanni's taste, though now it is little more than a ruin, as the wallpaper has all been scratched away to reveal concrete walls, while the furniture lies in splintered piles, having evidently been subject to the rage of the 7 inhabitants, Giovanni and his personal team, all of whom exhibit the milky eyes and necrotic countenance of the infected. Blood running cold, Silver realizes now why Namba would go to such lengths to research a cure, and why his father's quarters are so fortified and isolated from every other part of the base. Though none of that matters in this moment, as seeing a way out of their prison, Giovanni and his Pokemon feverishly scramble towards the door, and more importantly, towards Silver. Once again cursing the tight space of this facility, Silver and his Pokemon do the only logical thing they can, run and find a door to hide in like last time. However, due to being at the end of a long isolated corridor, none present themselves, with a ravenous Septet quickly gaining on Silver and his Pokemon. Then, calamity strikes, when Sneasel trips over its own feet, and before Silver or Feraligatr can save it, the Horde are upon it, biting and scratching after so long without any new prey. Despite his best efforts not to get attached after losing so many Pokemon to these monsters, Silver cannot help but feel a pang as he turns his back and continues to run, knowing that soon he and Feraligatr will have an 8th Pursuer on their tail. Thankfully, this brief delay does give the fleeing pair enough of a lead to reach a doorway and throw themselves inside just as the lights flicker off again. For a moment, Silver truly believes that he is safe, as the sound of footsteps reach the door, and surely soon they will pass, so he and Feraligatr can strike from behind, finishing off these monsters just like they have countless others. They can make it out of this. He just has to keep his cool. Then, he hears something that fills him with more fear than he's ever felt in his life. The creaking of the door, and the ragged breathing of this infected group. Knowing they're still at a disadvantage, Silver does the only thing he can, going back to back with Feraligatr for what little good it will do, and waiting for the enemy to make the first move. Then, just as quickly as they're disengaged, the lights return, with Silver seeing that he and his starter are surrounded, while the vacant monstrous eyes of his father stare into his own with something almost like recognition. Despite his terror, Silver realizes something now that he and Giovanni are face to face. The man is wearing the exact same clothes he did the night he told him he was leaving. Though he hates to give his father the benefit of the doubt, a thought then makes his way into his head, a possibility that he had never considered before. That when Giovanni had left him, it was not because he had forsaken him, but because he wanted to spare his son from having to share his fate, having already been bitten. Perhaps it had been his singular act of good to atone for all the wrongs he had committed, by locking himself far away from anyone he could hurt, and stoically accept his fate. Now, as Silver braces himself to do the same, as the encircling horde get closer and closer, he almost wants to laugh. Perhaps in the end, he and his dad aren't so different after all.
And that's where we're gonna leave this season for now. Though, with many more stories to tell in the zombie-ravaged Pokemon world, you can bet we'll be back.
though it may be a while, as such a spooky story deserves to be told in the spookiest of months.
But until then, have a happy Halloween.
And remember, beware what goes bump in the night.